Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. Just a quick preview for an upcoming heavyweight fight between Moses Itauma and Dillian White. Of course, this fight goes down on the 16th of August, takes place in Saudi Arabia. It's actually on pay-per-view, which, don't think I'll pay for this one personally. I'll watch it via other means. But, Dillian White versus Moses Itauma, for what it is, it's somewhat interesting. Moses Itauma is being hyped as the next best thing in the heavyweight division. And, I'm somebody who's very hesitant when it comes to judging heavyweight prospects because things can easily derail. But when I see the heavyweight prospects that are available right now, I guess I would put the most stock into Moses Itauma from what he's shown me so far. I think he's probably got the highest potential, but there's still a lot of things we don't know about him. He's got to a record of 12-0 with 10 knockouts. In those 12 fights, he's not really fought a great caliber of opposition. He's fought sort of fringe contenders like Dempsey McKean, faded sort of gatekeepers like Marius Vac. And, he's done his job in these fights, but he hasn't been tested yet, and the question is really, can Dillian White at this stage test Moses Itauma? Of course, Dillian White, 31 wins, 3 defeats, 21 of his 31 wins coming by way of knockout. Much more experienced guy, fought at a much higher level of competition, fought the likes of Joshua, Tyson Fury, Povetkin, Joseph Parker, Robert Helenius, Oscar Rivas, Chisora, etc. Been in there with a lot better competition, no doubt about it. With mixed results, he's picked up some wins at world level, been decimated in other fights. But the question is really in regards to Dillian White, what does he have left? And based on his last few showings, I don't think Dillian has much of anything left, quite frankly. The last 2 fights in particular against Christian Hammer and Ebenezer Tete, I don't think Dillian White looked good, particularly in the Tete fight. Ebenezer Tete is basically a knockout for hire in the heavyweight division. Fraser Clark knocked this guy out in 1 round. The fight after Dillian White, Dubois knocked this guy out in a round a few years ago. But Dillian White, I don't want to say he went life and death with Ebenezer Tete, but he made a meal of it. He made a meal of that fight. Ebenezer Tete, if you have anything, is a guy you're supposed to go through in 1 or 2 rounds, and Dillian White didn't. He laboured, pushing his punches. He was getting tagged up by Ebenezer Tete. Eventually, Tete was pulled out, but just not a good look for Dillian White, in my opinion. And again, fight before that against Christian Hammer didn't look great. Fight before that against Jermaine Franklin didn't look great. Close fight. I felt Dillian White did enough to win that fight, but it was close. Obviously, the fight before that, we go back to Tyson Fury, where Dillian White looked awful, got knocked out in 6 rounds. So you look at Dillian's recent form, he hasn't really been looking like a contender. We've always known Dillian's been limited, but he's had some success at top 10 level. But in the last few fights, it looks like Dillian White is so far away from that. But the question is, can he utilise that experience? Can he utilise that know-how, I guess, to take Moses Itauma rounds? And can he ask questions of Itauma? One thing about Dillian White, he does have a powerful left hook. He can generate some torque into that punch. And if it catches you flush, it can cause damage. Will Dillian take Moses Itauma some rounds? Can he land that left hook? Can he land some hurtful punches? And if so, how does Moses Itauma react to that? For me, in regards to Dillian White in this fight, it's pretty simple. It's going to come down to what he has left, both obviously physically, but also mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I guess you'd say, right? Is he going to go in there with the attitude that he wants to upset the apple cart, that his career's not done yet, that he still has like a one more sort of run in him kind of thing? Is he going to go in there with that attitude, or is he going to turn up for a payday, one last payday on pay-per-view? For me, Dillian White, I think we'll find out very early on. I think Dillian White needs to approach this fight like a last roll of the dice. And I think he needs to be very aggressive early on. I don't think Dillian White starting out cautious, going tit for tat behind the jab, is necessarily going to work in this fight. I'm not saying Moses has proven himself to be like an elite level outboxer or anything like that. You know, we still don't know, but Moses Itauma is so much faster, both in terms of hand speed and foot speed. He fights out of a southpaw stance. I think Dillian White being passive and playing a jab game and trying to ease himself into the fight is going to give Moses Itauma the opportunity to kind of shock him with his speed, plus the power as well. And listen, Dillian White's chin these days isn't looking as good as it did. He seems to be getting hurt a lot more as his career's progressed. So I think him being too passive is just going to invite Moses to try and land those quick, sharp punches. I think that will allow Moses to pick his moments, to pick his spots. And I'm not sure Dillian has the ability to get out of the way of those shots, quite frankly. I think the worst thing Dillian could do is try to ease himself into this fight. I think Dillian White in this bout needs to be aggressive. I think he needs to try to close the distance on Moses Itauma. Obviously, when you've got such a faster guy in front of you, you need to be defensively responsible, keeping that guard up, you know, protecting that chin down, hands up, jab your way in, and try to close the distance against Itauma, but close the distance to the degree to where you're on his chest, where you're smothering him, where you're taking that power and speed away a little bit. I know Itauma's got a mean uppercut. He's got a really good uppercut, but when you look at Itauma's uppercut, he needs space. He needs to take a backward step. He'll draw you in, then he'll land the uppercut, and that's obviously going to be very dangerous if I'm suggesting Dillian needs to be aggressive. But when he does get close, I think he needs to try and maul Moses Itauma. Try to literally be on his chest to cut the space, to close the angles. And he needs to basically try to be a bull in a china shop. Just a big, horrible heavyweight. You know, lean on his chest, like I said. Maybe even try to initiate half clinches where he's working with a hand free. Just making it very messy. Disrupting the rhythm of Moses Itauma. Making it a physical affair. Testing what's in that gas tank. Testing the heart kind of thing. Because I don't see any other way Dillian can get a result here. I don't see him boxing with Moses and playing like tit for tat, you know, picking his moments and trying to slowly get into the fight. You know, I don't see him being the counter puncher and trying to catch Moses with one clean shot. I know Dillian's got a half decent counter left hook, so anything can happen, but I just don't see that really working out for him, considering Dillian has slowed down quite dramatically and Moses is very fast. I don't see him winning the fight behind his jab. I just think Dillian's only real shot here is to be uber aggressive, ultra aggressive, and, you know, be a mauling, marauding heavyweight. And do it early. Do it early, first bell. And see where it goes. You know, doing that, obviously, that's a very risky strategy in and of itself, because I don't think Dillian could do that for 12 rounds these days, or 10 rounds, whatever it is. I don't think he's got 12 rounds in him like that, but I think you just roll the dice early on. And try to get to that body, try to test that chin, try to drag him into a horrible sort of fight, see where it goes. But this fight really does feel like a passing of a torch, like a setup kind of thing. You know, Dillian White, been a contender for a long while, way past his best, but still somewhat of a name. Just feels like this is perfect matchmaking, really, for Moses Itauma to look good, you know. I think, you know, the casuals are still familiar with Dillian White's name. Moses Itauma looking good against Dillian White will go down well among the casuals. You know, especially if he's able to do it quicker than Fury, Joshua, etc. You know, they'll eat that up. And I think Dillian's in the position in his career now where he's very vulnerable. He's ripe for the picking, so to speak. And I think Moses Itauma will more than likely do exactly that in pretty quick fashion. Ultimately, I just think he's going to be too fast, too fresh. I think he'll pick the holes in Dillian White's defense. Even if Dillian fights in the way I think he should fight, I still think he'll lose. You know, particularly the uppercut, as we know Dillian has always been susceptible to that shot leaning over his front foot. Even when he's got a guard, his elbows are quite far apart. That shot's going to be there for Moses Itauma. As will be check counter right hook. You know, Dillian loves to throw that jab and he'll bring it back to his waist, etc. That shot's going to be there for Moses Itauma. The straight left hand down the pipe will be there. You know, Dillian rarely takes his head off centre line. And the reactions now are so slow. I think, listen, man, every shot under the sun's going to be there for Itauma. It's just whether Dillian White has the hunger to roll the dice, basically. Maybe if Dillian rolls the dice, he could make it fun. He could make it a little bit competitive for as long as it lasts. But I just think the speed differential here and how washed Dillian is going to be it's going to be pivotal for me. But yeah, I mean, listen, there are question marks over Moses Itauma. Still very early in his career, and although Dillian White is still somewhat of a big name, I don't think Dillian White will ask those questions of Moses Itauma, personally. I just think Dillian White is washed. The only positive is I have seen a couple of interviews from Dillian White on IFL, and he does look like he's lost weight. It does look like he's training, which is good, you know. It's interesting, but I should have to clarify that when talking about boxing matches. Oh, this guy actually looks like he's training. But Dillian White does look like he's doing some sort of training, so looks in better shape than the last couple. So we'll see where he goes. We'll see what happens. But listen, I'm going to go Moses Itauma by stoppage. 5 rounds, I would say. 5 rounds. In round 5. I'll pick round 5 just to be a little bit precise. But yeah, listen, I hope Dillian asks a couple of questions, but I just think this is going to be a perfect example of matchmaking. That's how I feel. But yeah, share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Del Boy. Peace.